Hello, I'm Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN 35. What a thrill! Today, a topic Republicans and Democrats can agree upon: protecting innocent animals. As the owner of 2 dogs and a cat, and an animal lover in general, I appreciate the good work of the Pennsylvania Humane Society. Today, their director will fill us in on the many components of Libre's law, update us on dog tethering rules, and even share legislation in the works to stop ivory sales. So stay tuned to WYLN 35. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm so pleased to be joined today by Kristen Tullo. She is the director of the Pennsylvania Humane Society. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
And I have to give a shout out to State Representative Tara Toohill, who introduced us at an event not too long ago, and I'm thrilled that she did, because I really love animals and I love that you're working to protect these innocent, wonderful, wonderful beings.
Yes, and we're happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much. And there's been a lot going on, so there's a lot to update the folks on. I really want to start, before we get into legislation, just broadly speaking, have you explain what the mission is of the Humane Society?
Yeah, so the Humane Society of the United States mission is to protect animals and confront cruelty. And we focus on mostly what we're known for, companion animal rescue, so our work to protect dogs and cats. But I always like to let people know we also do a lot of work to protect wildlife and also farm animal protection. And we do a lot of direct care and rescue as well, and most of our work really focuses on public policy and enforcement of the new laws.
Okay. Speaking of the new laws, there was some really comprehensive animal abuse laws passed recently, signed into law by the governor. It has many layers to it. There's a lot of news for the people out there, so I'd really like you to walk us through what that law includes.
Sure. So this was the largest animal cruelty overhaul in the last 30 years in Pennsylvania.
Amazing.
It is absolutely amazing. And the movement, the advocate support behind this law, and the persistence of people who were making phone calls and sending emails and using social media is really what made sure that this bill got across the finish line.
Where did it start?
So it started about a year ago. Actually, I know the exact date, July 22nd of last year. I actually met Senator Richard Alloway, and we went to the Dillsburg vet together, and that's where Libre's law was born. We looked at each other and said, this cruelty is not okay, and we talked about legislation that would make sense to introduce. And so we knew we needed to strengthen penalties for heinous animal abuse. And so there, Libre's law was born.
And tell the folks, I mean, most people are probably familiar by now with who Libre is, but why don't you tell a little bit about that story?
So Libre is also known as the bug-eyed miracle. He is a Boston Terrier that was found at a farm in Lancaster County, and he was suffering from severe neglect. He was left for dead. And a delivery driver to the property actually found Libre, and it's one of my favorite stories. Dexton will tell you, he asked him, is the dog okay? And he just said, I don't know what's going on. He won't eat. And Dexton said, I think I can save him. And he received a Compassionate Advocate Award from the Humane Society of the United States this year for his compassionate, kind act. So he then contacted his friend, who was a humane officer, who then got in touch with Janine at Speranza Animal Rescue, who is now Libre's mom. And Dr. Pryor at Dillsburg Vet got involved, and it just continued layering from there.
Okay, now the penalties for doing things such as the abuse and the cruelty that poor Libre suffered from, the penalties to people. really not that severe until
Right.
all of this came into place. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so Libre's case was a fine, and under this new law, we have a provision for first offense felony for torture of any animal, and that means causing serious bodily injury or death. And that is one component of House Bill 1238, and that is the original vision of the bill. And then once we knew that we really need to get this bill through the House, Senator Alloway partnered up with Representative Todd Stevens, and we introduced the comprehensive animal protection package from there.
Okay, so beyond certainly dogs, such as Libre, what other animals are included in this comprehensive package?
What I love about the new section, which is aggravated cruelty, Libre's law, and increased the penalties for egregious acts of cruelty, it is not species specific, it's actually act based.
Okay.
So it would apply to any animal for that particular section of the new law.
Okay. One of the things that's really interesting as well is, you know, Pennsylvania, it's such big horse country.
Yes.
We love our horses.
Yes.
We have a lot of farmers. We have a lot of barns. We have a lot of people who ride, a lot of people that just have horses on their properties and love horses. But the protections for horses, virtually non-existent prior to all of this. So tell the audience about that.
So horse protection, horses were actually such a big issue that I saw in the state when I found out that misdemeanor charges only applied to dogs and cats. So the only penalty that someone would receive for any act of cruelty toward a horse was a summary offense, which is the legal equivalent of a traffic citation. So
regardless of if you beat it, you starved it, no matter what you were doing.
as long as it was your horse, that was your property and you could do what you wanted with it. And now, what under this new law, Senator Eichelberger introduced Cordelia's law initially in the Senate. And so this became a part of the House Bill 1238 package. And Senator Eichelberger actually came across a horse in his district who came to be known as Cordelia.
Okay.
She was found at an auto salvage yard. She was suffering from starvation. She was emaciated. After 10 days of vet and foster care, she couldn't be saved. And so Cordelia's law was born out of that and a part of the package. So now under our new law, we have added protection for horses, so misdemeanor or felony charges in the case of torture could apply to horses in our state.
Well, that is a wonderful, wonderful
Yes.
thing as well.
Yes.
I mean, and it's just so shocking to think that these animals had no protections at all.
It is the horse protection piece. We also knew that we, as our volunteer committee, our state council members and district leaders banded together to rescue 2 horses from Omega Horse Rescue. And they were actually for an at-risk slaughter situation, and they became the ambassadors for the reason we needed horse protection issues in our state. Little Penny their names are Penn and Penny, named after William Penn of Pennsylvania.
Of course, naturally.
Naturally, and Penn befriended Penny. So we knew they became a bonded pair, and Penny has only, she's missing one eye. Penn was a former racehorse. When he was done racing, he became a working horse. And when he had an injury, he was no longer able to work. They took him to a situation where he was at risk for slaughter. So we adopted them, and now they're at the Pittsburgh Rescue Equine Foundation.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And with that lovely news, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some new regulations as related to tethering. Yes. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm joined today by Kristen Tullo. She's the director of the Pennsylvania Humane Society, and we've been talking about really the most comprehensive animal abuse law to be signed by the governor or put in, period, into legislation in the past 30 years.
Yes.
So it's very good stuff. You had walked us through some components of the law. We had, in the last segment, we were talking about Pen and Penny, some horses that were rescued. You just want to continue one point about that.
Yeah, I think it's really wonderful that Representative Toohill, this is her district, and her constituent, Brenda Mowery, who is a huge animal advocate, actually helped to set up the transfer of Pen and Penny from Kennett Square all the way to Pittsburgh.
Well, way to go, constituent.
Yeah, I know.
They don't just complain about it, they did something about it. That's a very good thing.
They sure did.
There are many other components of this law. One piece of it is anti-tethering regulations. If you could explain what's changing there.
Sure. So prior to the new law, we did not have any tethering regulations in the law. So these are put into place as a basic step in the right direction for those dogs that are tethered as a means of confinement. So there are basic regulations, and the first is that you cannot tether your dog longer than 9 hours within a 24-hour period. We know that dogs who are continuously chained suffer severe psychological damages, where a normally docile dog can become anxious and aggressive, to physical damages. And we actually have some pictures of Tanner, who was from Animal Care Sanctuary in East Smithfield. And Tanner was 10 years old when he was brought to a shelter and had no muscle mass, was barely able to walk, and he had spent 10 years at the end of a chain. And after the last few months of his life, he was adopted and spent those months in the comforts of a loving home. But that's really the reason that we needed a law on the books to prevent that continuous tethering, from the Pennsylvania Veterinary Medical Association to the Humane Society of the United States to an increasing number of state and federal agencies, including the USDA. They have positions against chronic chaining of a dog.
Okay, and it's something that's important to get the word out about, because a lot of people don't know about that. And while yes, you would think logic would prevail and they wouldn't do this, the reality is if logic won't prevail, perhaps the law will.
Yes.
And they will understand that they can't do that.
We really want to utilize this section of the law as an education piece. We want people to keep their animals with them, and oftentimes this is an opportunity for a humane officer to be able to explain the best protections to have in place for those animals that are tethered as a means of confinement.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, there is also in the law some protections for veterinarians and for police officers working with a humane society, if you could explain that as well.
Sure. So this is the first time that veterinarians and humane society police officers will have civil immunity protection. So this prevents frivolous lawsuits when they're reporting animal cruelty in good faith. Before this new law was in place, will be in effect on August 28th, right around the corner, veterinarians, for example, could have a suspected animal cruelty case, but they were at risk for being sued as an individual, for their business being sued, should they have been wrong in that circumstance. And so it's really important that we're protecting those who are protecting our animals. And this was a major step in the right direction under Pennsylvania law.
Okay, tell me also about mandatory forfeiture and how that plays into the law.
That is a big piece of this bill. So as the law currently stood, someone could be convicted of animal cruelty and have that same animal returned to them that they had abused. Under this new law, victims of abuse would be required to be forfeited to an animal shelter. And there's a case with Biscuit, is a dog from the Anna shelter. So he was brought to the Anna shelter in Erie, Pennsylvania. Biscuit had 13 cigarette burns put out across his body. They broke his jaw. He was a victim of domestic violence dispute. And in that circumstance, now that animal would be required to be forfeited to an animal shelter.
I'm getting choked.
Yeah.
That's just,
yeah.
It's like beyond. It's just beyond. And these animals, for so many people, I mean, my husband, I talk about this a lot. He's a combat wounded warrior. I have to tell you, our dogs are his companions. They have been lifesavers for him as he's come home healing the scars of war. And just to think that there are people, it's like, why even have an animal if you're planning to do this? But I guess I also don't understand why people abuse children or abuse anybody.
Yes.
So, you know, unfortunately, there are people with serious issues out there, and we can't have them be able to keep animals.
And you did bring up the link between animal abuse and human violence is highly correlated. And the Center for Children's Justice was one of our big sponsors of our bill. They hand-delivered letters to the legislators in support of this bill. You had the Fraternal Order of Police, District Attorney Association, because they understand the links between violence.
Sure. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here in terms of training law enforcement, in terms of, you know, legal counsel training?
I was with Representative Todd Stevens this week, and we were talking about this exact, where do we go from here, what's next, and where we see the biggest opportunities are with law enforcement. So we're looking at how we can either deliver law enforcement training on animal cruelty crimes, so we can help give the tools to identify animal cruelty crimes. And that would be at a state level. We would love to see. If we can't go at the state level, of course, we'll be able to do things across the state in different cities. We also want to focus on district attorney trainings, and we're doing any legal counsel across the state. So right now we have some really great webinars coming up for legal counsel. We've got great relationships with law enforcement across the state. So I really see that there's a mutual symbiotic relationship where we're learning from them, they're learning from us, and this is all to benefit animals and, as you've mentioned, children, families, communities.
Oh, well, I love the work that you're doing, and I can't wait for you to share a bit more, because in the next segment, we're going to spend some time talking about something that one doesn't necessarily think about locally, but it's a really important issue that actually has local implications and implications as related to domestic terrorism. So we're going to talk about that, but right now we're going to take a break. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. So just to wrap up a discussion of this comprehensive animal abuse law that was signed recently by the governor, I think it will be really interesting to watch the data over the coming months and year to see if hopefully this is a deterrent, and hopefully people, when they see how others are prosecuted, will be hesitant to do anything that is improper.
Yes, absolutely. And we are looking to introduce an animal abuse registry, which would track felony level convictions, and that would be very helpful data to know how successful that we are with this new law.
Absolutely, and these people shouldn't be allowed to go out and get another animal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we want to make sure that we are not putting an abused animal right back into the same situation again.
You bet. So I was talking about something in the last segment that I said may have even some ties to domestic terrorism, and it's an interesting topic. It is actually a bill that Representative Toohill is one of the people co-sponsoring.
She's a prime sponsor.
She's the prime sponsor, okay. And it's really to prevent the sale of ivory, which comes from elephants and rhinos, to prevent the sale of it in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, so elephants, the hardest part is that they are on the threatened species list right now. And one elephant dies every 15 minutes. So by the time we get done with this segment, one elephant will have died. And this is a very important issue for three key reasons. The first is that there's a direct link to terrorism. So Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda are terrorist organizations that they have rebel groups who are poaching the elephants. The second piece of that is that when they're poaching the elephants, they are then murdering the park rangers who are on duty. And in the last 10 years, there have been over 1,000 actual murders that have occurred because of poaching issues. And so
then they take the ivory
and then they take
sell
the ivory And we are the second largest consumer behind China, and we are directly then funding a link that's right back to terrorism.
Right, so those who are buying ivory products are actually
Yes.
helping to fund terrorism.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and from a perspective of the protection of the elephants as well, there's a saying that an elephant never forgets, and it's really true that the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya will give testimony after testimony of elephants that were babies who saw their families slaughtered in front of them, that they'll go to try and rehabilitate them, and they are just not able to get there psychologically because of the traumatic experience that they have had in their lives.
So Representative Tuhill's legislation would do exactly what?
So we would be banning the sale of ivory within the state of Pennsylvania. Currently, there's regulations that would not allow you to do that from state to state, but we want to help close that loophole in our state. We actually had the largest illegal ivory bust in U.S. history federally on record, and it was
in
right
Pennsylvania.
Yes, it was right in Philadelphia, and so we believe that this is the right step for us to say we're taking a stance against the illegal ivory trade, and we want to close that loophole to protect elephants and rhinos, but to also make sure that we're, from a public threat perspective as well, that we're not funding terrorism.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think you are doing wonderful work. Keep it up, and I want to make sure that the folks out there know that the Pennsylvania Humane Society, it is a 501c3. So if you're looking for good charitable work and you want to support their efforts as related to legislation, look into it. Do it. Because you don't want to just complain about it.
Yes.
You want to do something
Yes.
about it, right?
Call your legislators.
Wonderful. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching.